We have a significant problem with mental illness, suicide, and addiction. And it's not just here locally, although we have a big problem in Utah. This is a worldwide issue. This is a national issue. There are about 48,000 suicides a year in this country. About 3.3 million people think about suicide. Another 1.4 million attempt suicide on any given year. 20% of the population in any given year meet criteria for mental health treatment. If you add addiction onto that, you're up to about 30% of the population at any given time. You can see the SafeUT app. Access is a big problem, and that's where technology comes into play. How do you get access to a counselor? You know, what if you can't wait? What if you're really feeling suicidal? Who do you talk to? And so the app has really produced immediate access along with our crisis line and warm line. And our warm line staff with peers, certified peer specialists, people with their own lived experience. So if you look at addiction, you can see how many deaths we've had in the opiate addiction since 1999 and the growth in that. Over 70,000. And then if you look at what we're at in Utah, this is Utah by gender. And I'll leave that up for a little bit. So the question to the panel is, okay, so we have all this data. We know what the problems are. We know the depth of the problems, and yet there's no discourse on it. Why aren't we attacking this in a more aggressive way and solving it? And part of it starts with discussion. And so to the panel, why don't we talk about this?
Far too many people are suffering in silence, and a lot of it has to do with the stigma and the social perception of mental health. And if there's anything that we could do individually or collectively to begin to address this difficult issue is to change that stigma. I think we've made good progress in that area, but there's a long ways to go. Stigma is very real, and it's very powerful, and it has a significant effect on people. When we think of people suffering from mental health, unfortunately, a lot of people think of homelessness, or they think of mass shooters, or they think of crazy people mumbling to themselves, and that's not what this is about at all. This is something very different, and we need to make sure we're changing that stigma.
So the Huntsman Foundation's made a transformational gift to the university of $150 million over 50 years, or 15 years. Can you talk about where you want to go with that? What do you want to see change in the next 15 years?
Well, I don't think that there's another issue that affects more people than mental health today. It's our generational challenge, and it's multifaceted, it's complex. There's so much about our brain that we don't understand, that we address mental health very differently than we address a lot of other health issues. And, if our heart's not well, we don't hesitate to go see a doctor. If our bones are broken, we go see somebody to help fix that. But when our minds aren't healthy, our brain isn't healthy. We think to ourselves, is there something wrong with me? What did I do? Am I, just imagining this? If I ignore it, will it go away? We have all sorts of irrational thoughts sometimes, and, I would hope that ultimately brain health is no different than any other health, and we're all getting the care that we need to be able to address this issue much earlier than it's being addressed today.
Put up your hand if you know someone who's had addiction in their life. That's almost everybody. And that's because, 5% of the population currently have a substance use disorder. About 10% of people in our country are in active recovery. It's a huge problem. I think we talk about it. It's just the way that we address it that's a bit of an issue. David talked about stigma. Addiction carries, I think, extra layers of complexity because of the shame that enshrouds addiction and the way that we've perceived it in the past, that it seems to be somewhat of a personal choice or a moral failing. And we don't quite know what to do with ourselves when we find ourselves addicted. It may not look a certain way, the way we think addiction should look. Therefore, how do we proceed? Where do we go for help? So I think there's lots of layers of complexity to the addiction issue. However, people are talking about it. It's just how do we access treatment, and knowing that there is treatment available, treatment that's evidence-based and that works. Also moving away from social norms or kind of public displays of what addiction is or isn't, which is that, maybe go to rehab and then you're better after that, which is not really true, because like you said, addiction is a chronic condition. It doesn't mean you can't get better from that, right? You can put the disease into remission and move on into a perfectly healthy, functional life. That's the goal, hopefully. But it takes some effort to do that. When we look at functional imaging studies of the brains of people who are using substances, they look markedly different to people who are not using substances. When we treat people, they actually get better and their brains change back to looking like normal subjects. Likewise, we're looking at methods to treat people with scientific method and find that medications are often indicated and effective and should be part of the treatment that's offered. It may not be accepted, it may not be necessary for every person, but along with psychosocial support and therapy and different levels of care depending on the severity of the addiction, we should be offering medications. So we've moved a long way from when we only had, say, AA to offer, which is still an astoundingly successful, transformative process, to having a lot more things we can offer people. And I think in addicted populations, we often talk about these people or those people who are addicted, but really, it's all of us. It's our mothers, it's our spouses, it's our children. So there shouldn't be any of these people. It's all of us. And we don't treat people with diabetes like they're some other class of humans. So hopefully we can change the dialogue. Changing the language is very important, and I think that's the same with mental health issues, changing the language surrounding it, providing access through technology, providing access through innovative programs and funding can hopefully change some of that. That's my opinion.
My parents made it their crusade throughout their life to address, declare war on cancer, because they felt that that was where they can do the most good to help the most people. And my mother's still alive and doing well. But our generation, we feel that mental health is our generational challenge, and it's the area where we can do the most good to help the most people. And if it takes the rest of our life, so be it. The difference between mental health and a lot of other areas of health like cancer, there's well-established criteria about what best practices are in cancer. And I think here in Utah, we have a very unique opportunity. In many ways, we struggle. We seem to be like we're the best or the worst of all 50 states in whatever we do here in this state, but I think we have a very unique opportunity in mental health to come together and to set a standard. And our hope is that we could become, the benchmark that every other community, every other state wants to follow when they're trying to address complicated, difficult issues in this area, that they're going to say, we want to do what Utah is doing. We want to follow their example, that we can set those criteria and standards for others to follow.
Suicide is the 10th cause of death in the nation. That being said, you mentioned about Utah being the worst, and Utah has been among the worst in the nation with suicide, but we've actually been seeing a slight decline in the last year, 2 years.
Hopefully it's going to be 2 years.
Okay, yeah. So, but we've had a lot on the, as far as like SafeUT, we've had a lot of different states contact us, and one state went and toured many other states, seeing how they were doing it, and he flat out said, we keep coming back to Utah. We feel like Utah is doing it the right way.
Feels like we're starting to change. We're starting to recognize that this is important. This deserves our best efforts and our focus, and that we got to commit, step up and commit more resources. It feels like society's starting to change. The stigma is starting to be addressed. I'm actually really hopeful, despite the fact that we're struggling in a lot of areas. I'm really hopeful as we go forward that we're in a good position to make significant improvement.
I'm actually pretty excited about the future of it. I mean, the technology is just growing so fast, it's really difficult to keep up. But we have, there's so many things that we can do now, I think, that can address in this space. Natural language processing, which is something we're taking a look at with SafeUT. Working with companies like Banjo, if you don't know who Banjo is, where just live, real-time data coming in, being able to analyze safety risks. Not
until we come together and have the right vision, only then will we become a magnet to begin to attract resources from other places where they say, I want to come to Utah, I want to be in Salt Lake City, I want to be associated with what they're doing because they're doing it the right way. But we're doing our best efforts to grow our resources internally, but ultimately, we need to pull the best and the brightest minds, the most talented and capable resources from elsewhere to come here.
So I want to thank the panel. We want to give them applause. Appreciate it.